Hey, good evening, everyone. It is Scott here from Art of the Genre and Hal from 13th Warlock. We're streaming again. This time we're going to be talking about one of my, I guess, they're mega dungeons or big campaigns, which is the Virgin Mine. It started with folio number 26, and we'll, go ahead. The Virgin Mine. It started with
we got a
folio
loop.
number 26. I'm hearing that. Go ahead. The Virgin Mine.
That's kind of weird. We got a
folio
loop.
number 26. I'm hearing that. Go ahead. The Virgin Mine.
That's kind of weird.
We got a loop number 26. I'm hearing that. Because we weren't getting that before.
No.
I wonder what's going on with it. Let's see if we hear it now. Nothing?
I had myself muted.
What's going on with it? Let's see if we hear it now. Nothing? Huh.
I had myself muted.
What's going on with it? Let's see if we hear it now.
Yeah, so
Nothing? Huh.
I had myself
What's
muted.
going on with it? Let's see if we hear it now.
What could the problem be with this?
Nothing? Huh.
I had
Who
myself
knows?
muted. Let's see if there is audio. What could the problem be with this?
Nothing? Huh.
So I have echo cancellation checked. Let's see if there is audio. What could the problem be with this?
Nothing? Huh.
So I have echo cancellation checked. Reduce background noise.
What could the problem be with this?
So I have echo cancellation checked. Reduce background noise.
What could the problem be with this?
So I have echo cancellation checked. Reduce background
What
noise.
could the problem be with this?
So I have echo cancellation checked. I think it's coming from my end. Let me leave and come back because when you were gone, I was still getting the echo.
Okay. Well, we're here. We're waiting for Hal to get back. Hopefully, he will be able to get in, and we won't have any weird reverb with his like we had before. We were getting back stuff for it. But anyway, we're talking about Virgin Mine today, and just exactly what's happened with folio 26 through 31, although we're only up to 20. And I'm going to bring in exactly what we're looking for here with folio 26 and 27. And one of the concepts that we were looking at, or I was looking at when I wrote this initially, was to find a way. Oh, hold on, let's see here with we got Hal back.
All right, I think we should be good now. It was my monkey ass. You know what I had going on? I had the YouTube playing, the YouTube channel open and playing in the background.
That'll do it.
Yep. All right.
So I was talking about Virgin Mine, and we're talking here about folio 26 through 31. And now that we've got nobody watching it,
we'll get at least 2.5 views on YouTube. So
right, that's right. So one of the things I looked at primarily when I was doing the Virgin Mine was I was trying to find a way that you could go through an entire campaign and fight any of the low-level monsters that you wanted. Because a lot of people would argue that Dungeons and Dragons, be it first edition or fifth edition, are broken once you get 8th or 9th level. They start to to kind of spin out and things get a little bit out of control. And I think a lot of times people would say that sweet spot is like level 3 to 5, and people do enjoy lower level adventures. So when you're looking at a lower level adventure, what are you going to fight? Goblins, orcs, kobolds, hobgoblins, stuff like that, gnolls, lizard men. I mean, there's just a plethora of really great low level creatures that you can fight. But when you're doing a campaign specifically, a larger campaign, you're going to get out of those very quickly. You can only fight goblins in your first couple levels, and then they become much too easy to fight, right? And so this kind of trails into what I was looking at when I actually created Fast and created the ability to fight any monster at any time, no matter what level you are. But to do that within the confines of AD&D and 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I had to come up with a new wrinkle. So that is how I came up with the concept of the Virgin Mine. And the Virgin Mine is basically, it's like putting an inhibitor on your characters, and it only allows them to go up a hit point, a level, other than if they get a large.
The people that haven't played, to interrupt
Yep.
you, for the people that haven't played this or not familiar with the concept of this 4-part series, the concept is that there's this mine, as it's written, that there's this mine and that there's this material inside the mine that is highly valuable and sought after, and the players are going into this mine and trying to recover these ingots, right? That's kind of the premise of it.
Yeah, it's these mystic ingots, and I had to write them in as well, because if you limit everything within the dungeon to just fighting low-level creatures, the experience points is so limited that your characters aren't going to go up level outside of the mine when they're not inhibited. So what these ingots allow a party to do is, if you recover one, you can basically use its power, return it to the course of the mine itself, the magic of the mine, and then it takes everyone up a level. So that means even if you're fighting goblins in your 5th level, if you find one of these ingots, everybody that's 5th level goes up to 6th. So even if you're just fighting goblins. So that takes care of the experience point system of what you get for fighting a goblin, because the magic of the mine itself allows the entire party to go up. And then these things are obviously very valuable. If you get them outside the mine, they're worth tons of gold to rich people who are looking to use them for their own purposes. And that way I could write an entire series without ever overstepping these low-level creatures. So you see the first one here is 26, and that is the Rat Dungeon, which is kind of funny. When you look at the Rat Dungeon, one of the things you said, how when you were looking at it, there were some like randomized rooms with just weird things in it. And one of the things that I was looking at with it, at the time I was writing it, I was playing the old computer game Wizardry, where you just go down in the dungeon and you like open up a door and there's like 3 ninjas and 2 hydras. And it's like, what are they doing in this room? So I wanted to put some of that feel in it. So there's kind of some randomized rooms with just some weird stuff in there, like, bushwhackers and,
I took all that stuff out. I took it all out.
Right. Yeah. And you took it all out, but that's the reason I specifically did it. So that in that dungeon, you're fighting, rats and stuff like that, goblins. And then the next one is the serpent, the lair of the serpents. That's 27. That's when you're fighting mostly lizard creatures, snakes, lizard men. Then you go into the howling dungeon. That's number 28. And that's where you get into fighting gnolls and wolves and bears and stuff like that. Mostly, mammal creatures in a kind of a dungeon. And then you go to 29, which is your son's favorite, the Ogre Arena, which is a complete different divergence. I don't want to necessarily spoil it for anybody, but you're not necessarily just going in and killing everything. You're on a mission inside, and you get to interact with a lot of the things that you have seen in the other dungeons. Then 30 is the Great Maze. And the Great Maze begins to introduce things calling the Shadow Realms. And that is where you're able to not only go inside a room but you're also, if you have the correct magic items, you can go into a shadow version of those rooms and fight other creatures and stuff in there. And then those bleed over into the next set of mini modules, which I'm currently running one right now. You can look in the in the description here, and you can see the Indiegogo that I'm running for these bonus modules that are in these shadow realms of these dungeons, and then you can see the dungeon itself. And this is the Virgin Mine. You can see on the left, you can see all the different dungeons and how they're kind of broken up in this one. So there's 6 dungeons, and there'll be 6 modules. There's currently 5 of them out, but you can see them and how they're set up around this central diamond. The diamond is not available in anything, and nobody even knows it exists when they go into these dungeons. They only think 6 of these exist. But if you're able to go through all 6 and you're able to solve the secrets, you can find your way into the 7th dungeon, which is in the middle. And you can see here to the right, that's the green section of this dungeon. This is what I'm doing in the little mini adventures. So this one would be the shadow realms of the lizard, the Lair of the Serpent dungeons. And then so each of those you could have encounters in those rooms and shadow versions of those rooms actually on the 7th dungeon. And then here's the red dungeon, which is the rat dungeon, and you can find the vermin demigod in here. That's at the bottom of this map. But nevertheless, that's how this all is set up, and currently what I'm running in it, and what my concept was when I created it, which is to say, try to make an adventure where you can fight skeletons, no matter what level you were, and still have fun doing it without trying to barrel through big creatures that all have 65 plus hit points. It's like if you went through a big adventure like Descent into the Depths of the Earth, so you did against the giants. Like by the time you get to the big giants and stuff like that, you're fighting like you're so powerful at 12th, 13th, 14th level that you're fighting like 12 fire giants and stuff like that. And you're just trying to beat up their 80 hit points each, and while they're barreling out into you guys with 20 hit points each time they hit you. So I'm just trying to mitigate that and make D&D play faster and more fun at those lower levels. So I had to put the inhibitors in, which is what limits is your ability to cast spells, both clerical and magic, and also for fighters to have more hit points and stuff like that. But if you look at this on a whole, you'll be able to see exactly the rules of it that maybe Hal didn't get when he was getting ready to run it. But he'll explain to you as well how you can use these dungeons outside of what I've done if you're looking to run them in a different way. So what did you do when you started to look at them, Hal?
So I had a specific need when I went into this. The campaign that I'm running was sort of based around just reliving. It's a bunch of 50-year-old guys sitting around a table reliving our childhood. So we're like going back over the original first edition modules that came out, and we're playing them. But the camp, that was how it originally started, and then it kind of sprung off into the campaign started to breathe a life of its own. So we made my wife was going away for a long weekend, a work thing, and my friend by coincidence had taken vacation during that week as well. So that was 2 of us with absolutely nothing to do over that week. So I said, hey, let's get together and do like a 3 or 4 day gaming marathon, all day gaming and stuff like we used to do when we were teenagers. So I normally run very story intensive campaigns and a lot of focus on plots and conniving villains and political intrigue and all this kind of stuff. That's difficult to run over 4 days, of constant gaming. You need a mega dungeon. You need something like this where you can just. The problem was I didn't want to just pull a big thing off of the shelf, a big dungeon off of the shelf, because one of my players is like a literal encyclopedia of Dungeons and Dragons. So I didn't want him knowing what was behind every single door for 4 days straight. Like I can deal with that for a couple hours once a week, but 4 days straight I can't. That was too much. So I say, let me look at one of the mega dungeons that you have put together. I looked at the Virgin Mines, and I'm like, you know what, this is going to work for me. I'm gonna let me do this. Um, and it started out. I was doing the Black Label, one of the Black Label adventures, and I said, this is not going to be long enough. I need a dungeon that leads up to this. And so that's when I hunted down the Virgin Mines. And I really like the dungeons. I like how each one is kind of insular in itself, like it's its own particular world. And um not to give away too much, but they are, and I think you had originally planned it and then changed the course of things as the other adventures came out, but they were connected by these portal doors that were
Right.
activated by some like type of a rune stone. And I thought that was the coolest idea, harken back to the Against the Giants, where each dungeon in there, they had a device that took you to the next giant layer, from the hill giant to the one I think was a rope that you put in a circle, and they had all different things.
The
One was a
frost giants, yeah, and
thing,
then the
yeah.
fire, yeah.
So I'm like, well, this is a cool idea. They can I came up with a little plot that I dropped in on them. I did some finagling with time, like once they went into the mines, time sort of stopped on the outside world and continued to travel. It continued to move inside the mines. So if they needed to spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of game time inside the mines, it wasn't going to do anything to the original adventure. Um, and so that's what they did. I restructured the order. I started them out with the first adventure, the rat dungeon, and I really like the details that were in there and how the goblins, like, kind of, you always think goblins and wolves, but these goblins had taken to rats.
Right.
um So it was kind of cool that you saw, like, all right, rats, and it threw the players a little loop, because they're like, all right, well, we see rats and we see goblins, but we don't see any wolves. What's the connection here? And they're trying to piece it together. Um, and it was a really fun adventure. Then I had taken the ogre den, which I think was that supposed to be four. Is that supposed to be the fourth one?
Yeah, I think it's 4. Yeah. It's
So
after the Howling Dungeon, so it's 4th, yeah.
I moved that to the second adventure. Um, because that is like you say, it's like a mission oriented type of thing. And I tweaked it a little bit, because what the see, my characters weren't coming in and out of the dungeon. They were in there and they stayed in there. So the problem was they experienced up, and it was time for them to train, it was time for them to level up, but they're stuck inside this dungeon. So I moved the ogre den to the second one, because in that adventure you have more of a chance to, like, talk and interact with. It's not a hack and slash, hack fest through a dungeon.
Right.
Like, you're doing some talking, you're doing some finagling, you're doing. And I took a lot of the like the eye things that you had, like a lot of the broadcasting stuff that was in there. I kind of took that out, and I kind of made the whole thing more of like a type of a mystical type of an area, that was being run by a beholder. And through the beholder's magic, it was kind of generating all of these characters in there, not so much as what they would be normally, like a hobgoblin and a goblin and an orc, but what the beholder envisioned them as. So they were like, well, I don't understand, why are these goblins in this bar, why are they doing this, why? And that was like a thing that they were playing with for a while. I couldn't figure it out. But yeah, it's because the goblins in the adventure that I had run, they weren't real, they were manifestations of the bolt holders imagination. um so they spent their time in there, they did gladiatorial fights, and we had one character who was an elf. He was an elf fighter magic user, and he just by the luck of the dice managed to kill one of the champions, and through dirty fighting and spell casting, and so he became like the dirty elf. The crowds were booing him and all this kind of stuff, and he absolutely loved it. He absolutely loved it. So now they moved from there. They leveled up. They finished that up, and now they've gone into the Howling Mines, and they're about like 80% done with that. And I saved the reptile one for last, mostly because I just love lizard men, and I'm using the end boss guy in that. I've kind of blown him up a little bit, and he's going to be like the big baddie of these 3 or 4 dungeons that come up. So
so I think that obviously shows that if you have these unique dungeons, you have the ability to connect them together and use them in any way you want to.
Yes.
If you've got any DMing chops whatsoever, they're very easy to use and plop in and give your own little story and wrinkle to it. Even if you didn't use my overall thread, they're perfectly viable to be used in any fashion. The monsters are still there. The storyline, the concepts are still there, and like you said, all the dungeon itself is still there. So
what's cool is that you group these monsters in areas. So like if you're sitting back and you're like, all right, I'm going to run this adventure, and you're kind of, as a DM, you should kind of think, well, okay, what is this group of people going to do? Like in the Howling Dungeon, you have gnolls in there. All right, well, how are the gnolls? What are they doing? How are they dealing with these Flynn that are there? Like, what's their relationship? Like, are they hostile? Are they friendly? Are they trading? Like what's the deal? And then there's this third aspect of this. Actually, there's 4, I think, 4 different factions inside the Howling Dungeon, and
the kobolds, the Flynns, the gnolls. And I think there's some werewolves in there.
Yeah, you have one werewolf in there. It was Flynn's, gnolls, goblins, and mongrel men.
The mongrel men. Yeah, there you go.
Those are in the scaling one. So, my players, they passed over the mongrel men. They went right in. They ignored the goblins, and they went straight up into gnoll area, and just started cleaning house. They started with the Flynn, and they just started cleaning house. Now, they wiped out pretty much everything except for a handful of gnolls and the mongrel men. So the gnolls have like left their area, and they've gone to the mongrel men to be like, hey, listen, we need some help. We've seen the Flynn get wiped out. Now they wiped out, our chieftain, our champion. We're going to be next. Protect us. And because my guys are higher level, I took the mongrel men chieftain out, and I dropped a Fomorian dragon or a Fomorian giant in there.
Giant, yeah.
So when they go and deal with these mongrel men, now they're going to have this 13-foot tall, giant to deal with, which is kind of good because there's some nasty things inside of that Howling Dungeon with those champions and the Flynn Fiend and all that. There's some nasty encounters. The cave bears almost killed 2 of my players. Almost killed 2 of them. It's really a great dungeon, man. And I'm glad that I spent the time, to explore them with the players, because we literally ran these games, I think, for 3 days, and zero problems. It's just classic Dungeons and Dragons, and easy to shape around. Like I switched up some of the magic items, so that because I'm a little stingy with magic items, so my players needed a few items, magic weapons and whatnot. So I flip flop some of them around. I took out some of the more permanent magic items, and replaced them with scrolls and potions and whatnot, because I'm a miserly dungeon master. But other than that, this stuff just runs real good. super glad that I invested the time in running my players through it.
Well, it's definitely been one of my longest dungeons in creation. I mean, I feel like I started Virgin Minds maybe as COVID was hitting, like 2020. And here we are in 2023, and I've still got one more to put out, plus a couple of the smaller mini dungeons for the 7th dungeon before everything could be compiled. So there's still a lot going on in it as it rolls out. But yeah, I have 5 of them down now. The 5th one isn't in print yet, but it did get released, I think, last week in PDF, so it's available. And yeah.
Have you gotten any feedback from people that have played it?
No, I think one of the things that I find, I don't get a lot of feedback until everything's out. So, a lot of people will let it sit until they have the entirety of it, because they don't want to start playing it, get 5 in, and then the 6th one's not out, and then have to stop the campaign, because it's a big investment. So, I still hear good stuff on previous stuff. People currently playing the White Ship and Castles and Crusades, and obviously a lot of people play Roslov. But yeah, so we'll see this one. I'll be intrigued to see the kind of feedback I get back once it's fully out, because a lot of people don't want to compartmentalize it like you did, because they're waiting to actually do the whole dungeon.
Right. Yeah, I like how you put the water in there that heals. There's healing pools of water, because that's always a problem in any D&D game is the healing. So it kind of puts takes some of the weight off of the cleric, and let them explore some other spells, that they normally wouldn't get to use. And it gave the players an extra, like an extra avenue, just like an extra card in their deck to play. Like they didn't have to do 2 or 3 encounters and then, all right, let's pull back to our camp and try to hunker down in a room, which is ridiculous. Each of them were able to get a recovery of 2 to 6 hit points, or 1 to 6 if they weren't fighters. And that was cool too. Like, you had steeped it so that the fighters get back more hit points, which they should, because they're fighting. So I liked it a lot. And I had them roll the 2d6 or 1d6, and that's how many hit points they got back. And then if they only had taken, like, say, 8 hit points, but they rolled that they got back 10 hit points, then the next time they took the wounds and drank some water, then they would get back the other 2. So they always would get the maximum amount, that they had rolled. They wouldn't be short. But it's good. Like, they'll go into these new dungeons, and immediately they're looking for this. They're looking for the water, because it's only good for a day inside of it.
I think is what.
Yeah. They're looking for that. So I'm really anxious to wrap up these last. I guess we're probably going to be maybe 3 or 4 more adventures in before we wrap this up. I'm thinking 1 more adventure should wrap up the Howling Dungeons. I wouldn't be surprised if we spent 3 gaming nights inside of the Reptile Dungeon. Just because I love lizard men so much, I'm going to drag that out.
Are you guys playing now on a weekly basis? I know that was a big weekend, but do you have a session where you're getting back together for it?
Yes, we do. You know what it's like working, trying to get adults with a schedule together, and it's everybody. It's getting a little bit easier now that people are starting to retire and whatnot. But hell, half the time when you're retired, you're busier than when you were working. So
that's the truth. Yeah,
we do a rotation. So I do 2 weeks of my game, and then we do a week of Traveler. Sometimes we'll run straight through. We'll do 3 weeks of my game, and we won't play Traveler. Sometimes we do. Then our 4th week, one of our players is off, like he's working, so he can't come to the meetings. So on those weeks, we've been running. We just started up Mutant Crawl Classic, Then after that, we do a 2-week cycle of TUI, which another one of our guys runs. And then we do Traveler and then Mutant Crawl Classic, and then it's back to me. So we really are only playing maybe about every other month, 2 weeks every other month, 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll go
Right.
like, we'll go a month, 3 weeks to 4 weeks between blocks of playing. But I mean, it is what it is.
Right. I know you were talking to me about that, the kind of Gamma World-esque campaign that you were getting into, but I thought you were going to use Mutant Epoch, but you went with Mutant Crawl Classics instead.
Yeah, yeah. My friend had the book, and he's like, "Oh, I really want to play this." And the guy that was running it was like, "Oh, I can get that online," and so that's what he did. And we're doing Mutant Crawl Classic, and I can't complain. It's okay. I like
Right.
it. It's at least as good as Gamma World was.
Right.
Um, I'm not
Yeah,
a
I'm just interested. I would like to have seen if you guys played Mutant Epoch, what you thought of that one. But yeah, I mean, I'm sad you didn't get to go all the way through with that one because I've had a lot of fun with that system. So especially the generation. I know the guy you were talking about wanted a lot of crunch with his charts and stuff like that to have all your mutations. Because I know you and I have talked about my fast edition of the Gamolytic Age, where I was like, I have no charts, like you're human or you're not. There's nothing really else. And radiation is deadly. It doesn't mutate you into
doesn't
cool
mutate
things.
you into something else. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
really like that system. And I thought it was genius how you had when you found like these different items, that you could break them down into the components and then use those components to build other things. It was like that. It was like that video game. I forget. It's Fallout. I think Fallout.
you're right. Yeah.
Where you got like a fan or something like that, and you broke it down, and you got X amount of BS, and you used it to build guns, and so that was kind of cool, and it kind of like gave a new aspect to award and treasure in post-apocalyptic games, which is always kind of it's either you get the high-tech item or you don't, but
Yeah.
now you could get bullshit items that you can break down and make into useful things. Genius. I loved it. But
Right. One of the things I found in Mutant Epoch when we played it, it was like you went from banging two rocks together to carrying a rocket launcher. It was like, well, once I got the automatic weapon, the entire game changes so much.
yeah,
So that's one of the things that I found out that would be a drawback to it. So when I went in and looked at that, instead of handing over these high tech items, people have to come by it and build it, or find a smith that could do it and use those items and sell stuff. So it gives you a little bit more leeway. Not that people still won't get guns and be more powerful, but and I think fast always mitigates that in its essence anyway. But
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
that was interesting. But it was one of those things too. When I looked at it, and you and I got in, it wasn't an argument, but we always get into talks about it. It's like, do I invest in making this massive, mutation thing, or just keep it out like I wanted to, like I had initially done. So we'll see
yeah,
how it goes, because I know I'm doing some work on it right now. So we'll see how I'd let we have to do one of those where we talk about post-apocalyptic, because I think those are things that I know people don't play as much as they play as D&D, but it's still nice to see it every once in a while and how
hmm
other people are dealing with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I and the same thing with the mutants. It's the same issue that we're dealing with the hero games. Is that fast allows you, and I told this to my my friend. I'm like, listen, just put together whatever kind of mutant that you think you want to play, and you can make that mutant in fast. You can
Yeah.
use some of the superpowers, you can do some of the stuff from the cyberware stuff, use the rules, rename it, call it a crab hand, whatever you want to, like, and we could put rules together and you can make whatever mutant you want to make. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. He wanted his charts, he wanted to roll on the charts, and it's the same thing with the heroes. You can build whatever kind of superhero you want in fast. But some people want that Heroes Unlimited experience where they sitting down with some dice and they just, like they want to roll it on the table and, oh, I'm playing a bionic today. Oh, I'm playing a psionic today. Oh,
right. There's nothing
okay.
wrong with that.
No.
It's just the way some people look at a system. So yeah, I mean, having the availability of having charts, I think is a smart thing. It wouldn't be like, that's not the way I would do it, but it doesn't mean that's not a good thing to have in there that other people could really enjoy.
Yeah.
And do it that in that fashion. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a tricky thing. The mutant thing will be kind of easy. I think the superpower thing might be a little bit more challenging.
It's just superpowers get. I mean, if you went into like, I think I got the PDF for the Marvel Superpowers edition, and there must be 420 superpowers. It's just so insane, Yeah.
Well, I think Palladium Heroes Unlimited, don't they have like 4 books of just powers?
Probably. I mean,
like,
yeah, I mean, sure. I never owned them, but I did have the base, Heroes Unlimited. So
yeah,
and that had enough. But yeah, I'm sure they have extra power books for sure.
yeah. I think there's 4 of them. I think there's powers unlimited 1 through 4.
Right. But I think that almost, I mean, I hate to say it, but when you get into something that big or that expansive, I feel like it breaks systems. It would be like having 4 books of I don't know, feats for D&D 3.0 or 3E or Pathfinder. It's like, and somebody brings out book 3, page 120, and is like, I want this one that somehow breaks your system.
Yeah.
They'll find it and they'll use it, right? So, that's the most difficult thing about it. So in limiting it, even if you do charts, having some limit to it without making it super expansive. And then if you wanted to have that weird power, just that's the one you make up yourself, but don't allow it to a character. Like rogues stealing everybody's power ability, that kind of stuff where it just that character becomes OP. So you wouldn't, you don't necessarily want that stuff in there.
And it's a challenge too, because when you get if you're playing Heroes Unlimited, you roll it. It's so random. You get a guy that can manipulate gravity and stick to walls and has claws and shoots laser beams out of his eyes. All right, now make a cohesive hero out of that. Like, how did this happen? What was his deal? He got caught in a graviton machine while a laser beam hit him from outer space, and he was bit by a radioactive, I don't know what the hell has claws, a radioactive bear mauled him. Like, what? I don't know.
When I was playing, the last time we tried to play a game of Mutant Epoch, I rolled on the chart, and it was like my character I had like this concept of what I wanted to do with mutations. I got a lot of them, and then it was just like the character just like went from like here down. It was like, all of a sudden he had like skin that was oversized, only crab hands, drooled, constantly. I mean, it was just like he was just this monster, like, kill me. It was basically all I could do with the character, like this is completely unplayable because I got too many rolls and I rolled all this random crap that didn't go together other than to make just an absolute atrocity, that's some horrible thing that shouldn't have existed in the first place. So that's a tough thing when you have too much availability.
Yeah. I'm enjoying Mutant Crawl. I'm not gonna say that I'm not. I mean, the rules seem like they're just your normal kind of D20 kind of rules. So that's been fine. The randomization has kind of worked well for me. I like the characters that I ended up with. I did end up with an ass load of ass characters. I think we started with 9 characters, but now we're down to 4 of them. And I kind of like the ones. One of them has another person growing out of his chest, which is kind of cool. I have some art for that up on my site.
Yeah, that's a good piece. I remember that one.
Yeah, I got 2 pure strength humans, and I got one character running around. It's got 6 fingers. Okay, the 6-finger one is the one that's standing up front. Until everybody else levels up. He's going to be the next one that dies, but. I like the characters that I have, and it's a fun game. Like you said, things get out of hand kind of fast. Like already two of us have lasers. Um, it's kind of limited by the amount of energy clips that we have. Like we only have one energy clip in them each, so we don't even want to shoot them. But I mean, I'm looking of all the games that I'm playing right now. Aside from the first edition one, that's my favorite, the Mutant Crawl. So there's something to be
Wow,
said.
well, that's playing, I guess. You're not necessarily talking about Star Frontiers, which I saw you playing the other night. That's you DMing, I
Yeah,
guess, that one.
yeah, I'm running that one. No, I guess I kind of like that. Like, yeah, well, you can't compare games where you're playing versus games that you're DM, but
Yeah.
I do enjoy the Fast Star Frontiers a lot. Is a nice way to go back through those Star Frontier adventure modules that I liked. So
Right.
and it flows real well with the fast system, so that's a big plus too.
Yeah, for sure.
We got way off topic from the Virgin Mines.
We did, but that's all right. We covered most things in the Virgin Mine. 45 minutes is a pretty decent amount of time to talk anyway. But yeah.
I hope people give the Virgin Mines a chance though, and like I hope, like I think a lot of people may read that the beginning part, and like I did, they see that magic users can't cast spells unless they can do this, or you have to gather up these items before you can do this, and I think they might be like, oh geez, I don't know about this, but you don't need to use any of that stuff. These are traditional, dungeons, Dungeons and Dragon dungeon crawl style dungeons. They're stocked with classic D&D monsters. With a little bit of brain work from the dungeon master, they can put together a real cohesive story and plot in each and every one of these dungeons. Like you can link them together if you want. You could take them and separate them and play each one of them as its own existing campaign. You have like different entrances to each one of the dungeons. I think it's a really I was remarkably surprised with how well it was put together and how easy it was to play and how much fun my players are having with the game, with the campaign.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's why you produce the stuff, right? It's like Gobcocker. It's like you want something that is easy to play and that people really like
Yep.
and find some kind of attachment to. I mean, we've got to talk about Gobcocker at some point and people's obsessions with Eva or Sarah. I mean, it's like something happens and those characters go along with campaigns. Like nobody gives them up. It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
To see that happen.
I've never encountered anything like that where people, the three characters, man, it's either Deeth, it's Sarah,
Yeah.
or it's Eva, and they've gravitated to them, and I think it's because they get to spend time with them out of a combat situation. Like they go to the cabin and they spend a night and they have dinner with them and they have the dinner conversation, and they get to know them. Some of the and they have ambitions. The Lady Sarah wants to join the temple.
Right.
Lady Eva is like, hell no, you're not joining the temple, and she's got all this weight on her. She's now got to take care of her father's estate now. She's got some stuff going on with her father's shield bearer, and on top of everything else, you got Sabu Win who's screwing around with her, trying to manipulate her so until he can get his hands on the sword and steal her heirloom sword. So,
and then you've got the classic bad girl in Deeth, like
yeah.
And like your mama would say, stay away from her, whatever you do, but people can't. So yeah, I mean it's a funny story, but it's interesting just talking DM wise when you're talking about something like that, and that's one of the I don't want to go completely in the Gobcocker here because I'd like to spend actually a lot of time on it because it's so good. But one of the points of that is, like you said, the interaction, the dinners, everything that happens in the course of it. Like I'm currently in the process of playing in a campaign that you played in. That's Temple of Elemental Evil. And when you get into that temple, it's like 4 levels or 4 or 5 levels of a mega dungeon. And at some point, it just kind of wears you down because you don't have that interaction. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, next room, what do we fight? next room, what do we fight? Next room, what do we fight? Next room, what, because you're just trying so desperately to get through it. And you're kind of trapped inside of it because you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that makes it so hard. And that's one of the neat things about having the ability to like the ogre arena, where you're interacting with the monsters instead of fighting them, or you're with you're instead of killing Deeth, she's tagging along with you. And so I mean, it's a huge difference. And I think DMs in general, if you're watching this, you've managed to get through that crazy beginning where we're like stuttering around and you got to the 45th minute. It's so important to find that ability to have the characters connect with something within the campaign, right? And if they can do that, and if you can help them to do that, or you can make something interesting, then it takes an entirely different zone, and people will take your stuff and take it with them. And they'll be like I mean, the last time I played with Eva, who started in that little adventure. I mean, she was in Barrier Peaks. So you're going through Barrier Peaks at that point. That's a higher level adventure. Whole campaign, but she lasted the whole thing because we didn't want to give her up. And Deeth was around in a lot of that campaign, just like showing up here or there at the beginning. And then Sarah, we get her to some place where she can join the temple. So I mean, there's just a lot of stuff happens, but if you can make those connections, and I think that's one of the things that I know, we laugh about your art sometimes and what people are why people are looking at it, but having the ability to just see those characters in those situations allows people to connect to them.
Yes.
It's like my obsession with Duchess and Candela, who I saw Jim Rosloff do in Palace of the Silver Princess, and I fell in love with those two characters just from a piece of art. They're one stanza, one interaction. That's all you get with them. They can come with you, but the point being, I saw that, and to this day, I can't stop thinking about those two characters. All my black labels have to do with them now, and it's because I made a connection with something like that. And art can do that for you, and art has definitely done it for those characters as well as the storytelling. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, anytime I think it's the job of a dungeon master, not just to run the game, but to tell a story, and to kind of engage not to tell their own story, but to help the players tell the story of their characters. And in order for the players to tell the story of their characters, they need to be invested in their characters. Right. And if you don't have you're not going to get invested in your character because you killed a big dragon, or you walk through a fortress of giants, like that's going to be, oh yeah, it's cool, but you're not going to really remember that. That's just, you were rolling some dice at the table, you're doing some math on your character sheet, and it came out in your favor. But you're going to remember those interactions with these characters that are multidimensional and that have real goals, and that they seem like they're real. Because when you're interacting with real characters, your fantasy character now becomes real too. That was the goal with Gobcocker. And that's why I spend so much time talking about, like, giving backstories for all of the characters that I'm putting out in my books, Even
it's one of the things I tease you about. It's like, why do I have to have the entire history, back 500 years of this one item that somebody's not even going to get anyway, but you're going to give it to me. You're going to write it up no matter what. Yeah. Yeah. It's just really funny. Yeah.
It's important. I want people to know that the world that they're playing in, that they're taking their players through, existed before their players were going through it. You know what I'm saying? And the stuff has a history. And when you start unlocking that history, now the characters have more to explore, and it's easier for them to become, real themselves. The characters.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things when I started playing D&D, I remember, way back in the 80s, my first character, was Fleetwood, and to have a story enough to tell that, to have him have a child, right? And then from that point on, for 40 years of my life, I have followed that family line along with the family line of my friends within the course of the Nameless Realms, building. And it's not about, you're right, it's not about, did we kill 10 giants? It's did this person marry this person, whose kid died or whose kid lived, or as the story goes forward, and telling that story makes things so real. And that to me is what great role playing is. Not necessarily, you don't have to do the voices, you don't have to do these things, or, dress up as the character, but to commit to believing in that character, in that world, and where they're going, and that they need to get somewhere, that they're telling their story, and you're facilitating them, their ability to do that. And that's why Gobcocker is such a great entry character. I mean, it's so great as an entry module, because it basically opens up 5 or 6 roads, and we'll see where these guys are going to go, and every road is just as interesting as the other. That's what makes it. Even, it's funny because I initially did the playtest for it, I did the read through, and I remember looking at it, and I talked to my friend Brent, who's playtested so many things, or we played forever, and I said, come on, let's get online, because COVID was getting ready to hit, was hitting. It was like, let's try this on Zoom, just see if we can get it done and see how it plays, because we wanted to see how it plays. And I remember looking at it, I was like, it's so thin in combats, right? I mean, it's like 4 goblins, and each of them has 4 2 hit points. There's just not a lot of, and you're, even the end game is just a couple were rats and whatever else, and you're like, but that's not what Gobcocker is about. That's just giving people ability to do a little bit of dice rolling, but it's really about the story that goes along with it, and that's what captures everybody in that adventure. It's a wonderful, wonderful setup, and I give you great kudos for putting it out.
Yeah, nobody's talking about the were rats. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people talking about, everybody who's played Gobcocker will tell you that at least one of the players in their group has some kind of a connection with Lady Sarah. They're concerned about her. Is she recovering? Is he? You know what I'm saying? Like they have those connections. They have connections with the characters. Everything. The sequel to it, The Lost Eye, you don't really have those connections. That's kind of that when I wrote that, I just wanted to put something out there that was absolutely horrible, like
horrible.
Absolutely horrible. Like you start playing it, and it was like The Empire Strikes Back, of my children. Nothing goes right. Everything is horrible. Everything it goes wrong. It's just a miserable place to be in. And I haven't got any feedback back from it one way or the other. Nobody's saying they love it. Nobody says they hate it. It could be people are waiting for the 3rd book to come out before they run their characters through Kunstfeld. But
it's possible, and not every hit you have is out of the park, right? Not everyone's a home run. So I mean, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because there's not. You're right, it's just dark and it's hard. But are there connective tissues that make you like things as much as those 3 women that are in that initial adventure? I don't know. It's
I think people were expecting more of, they want to see more Lady Sarah, they want to see more Lady Eva, they wanted but you're going after the sword. They send you after the sword, and you just get a little bit down the road to the first tavern, and just the stuff turns sideways.
Total sideways. Yeah. And it's
So,
a very, very, I mean, again, when you write it, it's a very interesting story. There's a huge backstory. A lot of stuff going on. Again, can you get that out to the players? That's probably a struggle of the GM or the DM. But yeah, and something interesting, I don't know, I can't remember, is the Rod of Elf breaking in Kunstfeld, or is it in Gobcocker?
Gobcocker. Deeth has it.
Okay.
Deeth had it.
Yeah, Deeth had. So, but that's the most. So I'm running in the campaign that I'm running, that's Temple, because we started with Gobcocker, then went to Hamlet, then went to Temple, and so one of the characters has been corrupted by that. And I've been doing writing sequences, which is very, very interesting. The players don't even know this, but I've been writing sequences where the influences of that, have seemed to change the character, and all these things are happening during the course of the, her, going out with other people or whatever, anything else. But at some point she will realize that, and the character will realize that is all in her head. Every bit of it is completely made up just by the corruption. Like, she thinks she slept with these people. She thinks she's done these things, completely believes it, but it never happened because she's still corrupted in some fashion by that item. What a great item to put into a campaign, and to be able to spin up all kinds of crazy stories with it. Yeah, it's a funky one.
That's why time spent on the background of these items is time well spent, man.
I guess so.
You know where it came from. You know how it was generated. You know how it was made. You know all this stuff. You know who owned it. You know how it was lost. And always like to leave a gap. Like I say how the item is made, and I might take it through like the first owner or so, and then it's fallen into these other people's hands. And I leave that gap in the middle so that any dungeon master wants to fill it in, put it in anybody else's hands along the way, they can do that. But it's so important, man, to give, if you're going to make an item, you're going to put a new item out there, give it some history, man. Make it come alive. Anybody can just say, all right, well, this is a +5 sword versus, +1 sword +5 versus kobolds. Here it is. All right, that's just some words on paper. But when you start talking about, the wizard whose wife was killed by kobolds, and stole his daughter and stuff, now you're like, oh man, this is
Bitter Moon is another example of that. The blade that you're going after. I love Bitter Moon so much. I made a brother sword for it, Bane Silver, which I absolutely love. Yeah, and Bitter Moon's an interesting story because, again, you got a sword that kills, slays lycanthropes. But the interesting part about that sword, the really interesting part about it to me was, dwarves had to forge it. Their blood went into it, and it can detect concealed doors. Like, it explains so much of why a random ability is on a lycanthropy Bane blade. So yeah, I mean, it's fun, but
that was a completely randomly generated sword.
I assumed it was, and you had to make something up for it,
right? Yeah. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to? I think the original sword detected sloping passages or something like that. I'm like, how the hell is a sword that fights werewolves, lycanthropes, going to be able to detect sloping passages or shifting walls or some bull like that? And then I'm like, well, you know what? And came up with a dwarven idea. So yeah, it's, and hopefully, like I said, the goal at the end of the day is to get DMs to think about what they're doing, to live beyond the pages of the book or the module that they're reading, or if they're putting their own stuff together, to realize that you are helping players tell the story of their characters. And if you don't give them realistic things to interact with, then your players aren't going to be able to make their characters real.
Right. Yeah, they're just stacking up magic items on their characters and going to the next fight. And there's some people that like sitting at a table just to do that. They just want to roll dice.
They don't like that. They think they do, but that they don't really. They don't like that. No one likes that. Like, they might do it, but that's because they've never done a real D&D campaign where their characters have come alive for them. It's always been about, all right, well, they got the spot where the gold is all rubbed out from eraser mark, where they keep adding up, and they're like at 375,000 pieces of gold, and they got magic items that have now come off their character sheet. They're like scribbling them down in the lower level, talking about how great their character is. That character's not great, like they're not going to remember that character in 10 years. They might remember, oh yeah, I played a paladin and he had all these magic items and blah, 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 blah. They're not going to remember anything. Like, the character's not going to be alive for them. But, let them have a real role play experience where their characters lived in a world and, had a real enemy and, had a real mission or desire or purpose to their character beyond getting that next level or opening up, you know, emptying out that next treasure chest. That's what the game is about at the heart, you know, is telling a story.
And that's why when I did Virgin Mines, to bring it back to where we were, I tried to give you a story. Why is this mine what it is? Why does it do what it does? And can you figure out the mysteries behind everything to make your way through and get to the whatever is secret inside of it? So I think that's the most important thing, because when I did Roslov Keep, I remember somebody, one of my players said, you can't make an original dungeon. It's impossible. Dungeons are just dungeons. And I was like, no, that's not true. And so I went out to prove him wrong. And I did the same thing, I think, with Virgin Mind. So I went in with the same kind of mindset. But that's it. Tell a story and make sure that that story is something that the players will get invested in. And this, in Virgin Mine, everyone in it that's going into the mine, these companies are all these heavily armored fighters, because they feel that that's the only way you can make it through this dungeon, because magic doesn't work, and you know, clerical magic doesn't work, or it's limited so much it doesn't help them. So they just go in with fighters. And your job as this party, and the party is funny here. If you look at so here are the characters, and you can see they're wearing almost nothing. So they go through, and that, obviously that's fun to see a lot of skin. But the reason behind it is they're anathema to these adventuring parties, these all tough tanks that go in, and they're going to prove that they don't need that armor, that they can do it in their own fashion. And by going through it in the way that they did, you can prove them wrong, and you can figure out the mysteries of how magic can work, and how clerical magic can work, and how the stuff that you're doing can work. And you don't have to go in full plate mail, helm and shield and some kind of heavy weapon to try to bash your way through this dungeon. And the only way you can truly solve it is to go through like these characters are. So that's the kind of genesis of you know, what's going on within the dungeon, and then you can basically see them fighting. But that's Virgin Mine, which we're going to talk about today as well. But
explain the fairy.
Okay, well, she's not a fairy; she's a halfling. So, but she had a husband, and her halfling village tended to giant bees, groves of giant bees. And but something happened, and the bees ended up attacking her husband and killing him, stinging him. Of course, when a giant bee stings you, you're done. So she got really upset about it, and ended up killing a hive, and then taking their bee wings. And then she had you know, whatever magic was involved in the taking of it, she created basically a set of bee wings, giant bee wings, that she uses. So she's got limited flight, basically. So yeah, that's her down here, but she's a halfling. So, and that's just the bee wings that she took from the slayers of her husband. And then, of course, once she did that, her clan was like, get out. You're not a halfling anymore. You've gone against everything we believe. So she went to the south and then tried to join a company, and they said no. So all the people in this were people that tried to join one of the standard companies, and they all said no. And they all have a backstory behind what happened to them, and why they are what they are. Like the paladin down here to the bottom left, she was gorgeous and a paladin, and one of the clergy decided that he wanted to have his way with her, and she, you know, beat him up. And then he immediately went and told everybody that she had come after him. So they you know, turned against her and threw her out of the you know, the monastery or whatever she was in. And as they did, they pulled her armor off of her, and so only the pieces that she has left is what she could get through the gauntlet with before she came out the far side. But she kept her paladinhood, because she was correct, she didn't do anything wrong. But the bad clerics said that she did. So as spite, she only wears what was left of her armor as she fights. So that's her backstory. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of really cool backstories in here. The guy up in the top right is a care dwarf. His entire civilization was wiped out by the emperor, and so he's a wanderer, and nobody trusts care dwarves.
Are these characters anywhere? Are they in any of the books, like that you can see them as playable characters or anything like that?
Yeah, I just did them for Folio 30. So there's actually called a hero pack for Folio 30 where you have all their stats. So they're all statted, all their stories are there. Nice. And yeah, you got that with Folio 30.
Okay.
So it is available. And if anybody is looking for that hero pack, I'll be happy to give it to you if you just send me a note or anything like that, because it's like a little add-on PDF, but it shows you their stories. But yeah, they're all really fantastic NPC characters that all have something bad happen to them, and then they weren't accepted by these big companies, so they just kind of all found each other and then decided that they'd try it on their own, and then they're going to prove everybody wrong. So it's definitely a downtrodden story of adventurers that are going to break that mold. And anyway, but they're fantastic, and they're all done by Saldino Ross, is the artist who did them, and he's just fantastic. And he did the covers for the new Compendium Volume 1. He did the characters on that, and then some of the archetypes in Fast are all done like that too.
Yeah, it's definitely a campaign that's worthwhile to, like, if you were going to say, all right, you know what, hey, let's play some Dungeons and Dragons. What do I do? Do I want to run the Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh again? Now, this is a great every 50% of adventures for first edition campaigns start in the Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh.
That is the truth. It's funny. I went to college and I was like, I'm changing who I am. I'm not going to play D&D. And a week in, the guy next to me in the dorm was like, hey, I'm playing Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh. Anybody want to play? I was like, sure, why not? So I took a week off from gaming in my entire life, but Sinister Secret of Salt Marsh, of course, came back.
Yeah. 50% is Sinister Secret, 40% is Village of Hamlet, and 10% is a scattering of against the cult of the reptile god and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I bet you there's a lot that start with Keep on the Borderlands. I mean, Keep on the Borderlands has to get a few for sure.
Yeah,
that's a classic right there.
But
for
this
starting.
Is well worth it, man. It's because it is coming at it from a different angle. So you can take somebody, you can be playing Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years, and you have these extra wrinkles that you have put in there. And it's got a built-in story around it. You got the economy built in there. You've got camps built in there. You got built-in adversaries from rival camps that can be in there. Half the adventure, more than half of them, I think, have little segments before you even get to the mine with an adventure encounter type of thing that's going on in there. So, well worth it, well worth any DM's time, well worth any group's time to sit down and run through these.
Right. And one of the things that you look at when you look at this dungeon, the color schemes here, the mini dungeons that, like I said, I'm currently running on Indiegogo for the second one of these, the green dungeon. But if you look at that, I mean, if you've ever seen Keep on the Borderlands, the Caverns of Chaos, they're kind of broken up like that too. In a way, it's like goblins control one section, orcs in another, cultists in another, so it's got that same kind of feel. It's just on a bigger scale. But that's another thing that I was looking at as I was doing it. But like I said, each dungeon kind of has a theme, but they all connect. That's kind of what you're looking at in Caves of Chaos, which I thought was so fun for a low level adventure to start out with. So I kind of mirrored some of that stuff on it. Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap it for tonight, because what time is
it? It's
after
8:08. Yeah, we've been talking for a little over an hour, so that's perfect. All right. Didn't have anybody comment, but we did have some people in watching, so that's always good.
Cool. How many people do we have in watching?
3 right now.
Where do you see these numbers? I don't. Oh, maybe you can see them, but I can't see them.
It might be. Yeah, they're up top. It shows number of eyes on. So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, nobody commented, but that's okay. As long as there are people watching, I'm sure people will come in on the YouTube later and watch it. If they can get past that first 5 minutes, hopefully it's entertaining.
If you guys are watching and you have some comments to say or anything like that, type that in the chat, and we'll definitely read them and respond to that stuff.
Here's Arc Paladin's getting ready to comment for us, so at least we got somebody to say something.
Oh, is he typing it?
or his comment is comment. There you go. Clever Art Paladin. Very clever. Yeah.
There's something wrong with him. I know him personally. There's something. Actually, Arc Paladin is the reason that the Warlock existed. If it wasn't for Arc Paladin, there would be no 13th Warlock, because he entered. I'm not going to say he introduced me to 3D art, but he got me over that learning curve of, because I had tried the 3D art with Daz Studio and whatnot, but it's just too much, it was too much, because it was a lot. And he had been doing 3D art for years and years and years. He was working with the Poser system, and the Poser and Daz Studio, they're like brother sister type of things. And so he wasn't exactly familiar with Daz, but he was familiar enough that he could be like, oh, well, yeah, this is what your problem was and why you couldn't do that, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And he got me over that learning curve. And now, 3 books later, and
the rest is history, right?
it's history. More than 3 books, but
right. Absolutely.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we'll head it up for tonight. And as always, from Art of the Genre, great gaming. And we'll see you hopefully next Tuesday, 7 o'clock.
I might even have a shirt without holes in it. I'm not promising anything.
All right. Later, all.